My
slides are, it's not good. Oh, here we go. Just didn't update the date. Okay. It sounds like we're ready, Neil.
Okay.
Oh no. Is it good? Oh, I'm wondering if it's me.
It's you.
Better.
That looks better. Yeah. I don't know if we have participants. We don't have anybody to check. Oh, Covey is just coming online.
And Smita is joining. She's trying to find her Zoom link.
Okay.
So she should be joining as well.
Covey, can you hear us?
I can.
Wonderful. That was hitting an echo on Covey's side. Okay. Well, with that worked out, and Smita probably will be hopping in here soon. I think we can start roll call. We'll start our April meeting of the Environment and Climate Committee. Let's start with the roll call. Alex is not here. Andrew?
Present.
Covey?
Here.
Kelly is not here. Laura?
Here.
Lauren is not here. Mark?
Here.
Neil is here. Rory?
Here.
Serena is not here. And it looks like Smita is trying to get into the room, but currently isn't present. And it doesn't look like we have either Sasha or Jackie, our ex officio members, here either. We'll go into our meeting minutes approval. Any notes on the meeting minutes? Particularly if anybody was voluntold through the minutes for signing up for something they didn't intend to be signed up for. No. Great. I feel like those are the most exciting minute updates. Either I volunteered and it wasn't on the list, or I wasn't on. Yeah. Anywho. Okay. No notes there, so minutes are approved. Public comment. Cassie, do you want to lead this?
I'm sure. Do we have anyone in the room who would like to make a public comment? And then it doesn't look like we have.
Just a quick note, I wish we had more public comment. I would say if there's anyone out there listening, don't hold back, we're curious to hear what the people are thinking.
Yeah.
Well, nobody's listening online, so.
Okay.
But it's recorded.
Well, maybe on Zoom,
Yeah.
on YouTube, we don't know, yeah.
There we go.
We get YouTube views.
Thank you.
So.
It's probably my mom.
Family members of the committee, your parents can come to meetings.
And we do also have the ECC email address, so people are able to make public comments that way. And we do receive those from time to time.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah. Okay. I also agree, Andrew. I like public comment. Okay. So then staff updates.
Yeah, so a couple of updates. Two of them are that for the two projects we have coming up this year, which is the CCAP update and also the electrification policy options analysis. Both of those are projects that we're seeking some consultant support for. And so both of those RFPs are like on the street, as they say. Well, the electrification one is going to be tomorrow, but the CCAP update is already out there. So that's just for so you all are aware that we're making progress on getting those projects started. And as a reminder, we're starting the CCAP update. The first step is we're launching it next month, doing kind of a progress report and figuring out which actions we can just say are complete. So kind of, yeah, so that's exciting. And we're going to go on those. Any questions about
When
that?
are those proposals due for the CCAP, and what's the review process?
The CCAP one is a little shorter. We did an invite only for that. They're both informal solicitations because they're under $100,000. So that one is due, I think, on the 23rd of April. And then the other one is we have an e-procurement software. So they're kind of open for whoever to see. We sent it to some of the firms that we were familiar with that might be interested, but we can get people that even didn't get the direct invite who see it. And so that one closes May 1st. So yeah, hopefully we should be able to have both of those entities on board soon.
And are you, as far as the selection process, is that a?
The CCAP one, I'm just reviewing them myself and selecting, and then the electrification policy options analysis, we're gonna have a staff committee, a small staff committee, which is gonna actually include Mary and another attorney, since the legal part, the legal analysis is a significant part of it, so we'll do a review process. Yeah. And then the other update is that next week we have scheduled one of our council quarterly updates. So quarterly, we go to the council and we do an update to them on council goals. And each time we focus on a different goal area. And so next week's update is focused on our environment and climate goal area. So I'll be giving, the agenda includes an update from me on the CCAP. And the way I'm going to structure that is it's a lot of it's just going to be kind of an overall progress report on the CCAP as a whole, because that's not really something that we have reported back to the council holistically. So we're not only updating it on like this current biennium, but just kind of a big picture CCAP update. And then I'm going to share with them what our focus is on this biennium, which at the current moment has primarily been our outreach and education initiative. And then the energy working group is also working on expanding access to low cost energy audits, which we'll hear a little bit more about when we do working group updates today. So I'm going to share all of that with them, and then also the timeline for the CCAP update and the process that we're going to go through that. And then we have one follow-up from the electrification work session that we had last week. There was like a follow-up discussion they wanted to have, so that'll be included in my presentation as well. And I can talk about that. We have an agenda item for a debrief from that. So I can share more about that when we get to that agenda item. And then in the whole environment and climate goal area, we also have, there's a bunch of water conservation elements to that. So our utilities team is going to also do a big water conservation update. And then our CEDD team will include just a really quick status update on the council. As part of council goals, there was interest in looking at code around auto dependent uses in development and what options might be to regulate some of that or change our code for some of that. So we haven't started that project, but it's part of council goals. And so the CEDD department is just going to come and give an update on like when the council can expect to be launching that. So I can share that if that's something that you all are also going to be interested in. Once I hear the update from them, can share that back with you as well.
What's CEDD?
That's community and economic development. It used to be, we used to call it CDD, community development. So that's like our, all the permitting departments and current planning. So like Pauline and the tree code, that all is run by the CEDD department. And then at the end, so the way that those quarterly updates are structured is that staff give a bunch of updates, and then we have an opportunity for boards, committees, and commissions to participate and comment on what has been presented. And so you all have an opportunity to participate in that. We typically invite the boards that are most relevant to the topic area. So you guys haven't participated in all of them, but Neil is going to come and join that discussion as well. And we can talk maybe after this meeting about if we want to coordinate further on that.
Yeah. Sounds good. I got it on my calendar.
And if anyone else wants to join for that, you're also welcome to, of course, join and listen. It typically ends up being very much just a reporting out, and it's not usually like a really robust council discussion. But it's a good opportunity for us to kind of share back some of the work, which we haven't had an opportunity to do in a while. So any questions about that?
So the update is on the environment and climate. Wait, environment and climate committee goal updates.
Oh, sorry. It's the environment and climate goal updates.
Okay. So yeah, so it's not a committee update. It's
No,
the
yeah.
environment and climate goal as a part of council goal.
Exactly.
Update.
Yeah, sorry. That's just
Okay.
a mistype.
Is this a place where we could think about the FTE conversation or not?
I mean, I think, yeah, you all are, so,
I was gonna bring that up later when we were in the work groups, if there wasn't something explicit on the agenda, but maybe that's a place for it here too, if you're thinking about what you're talking to the council anyways.
yeah, we can maybe talk about that. I have some thoughts on that I don't know that right now is the right time to get into it,
Okay.
but, we can maybe talk about that, Neil, in preparation for that.
Sure.
It seems like it'd be a shame to let this opportunity go if you're speaking directly to the council
Yeah.
about these goals. And basically, potentially describing how the goals to really accomplish those goals might take more than one FTE. of
Yeah,
staff.
and so when I go through the CCAP progress report, I actually have it structured in like the 4 sectors, and here are the accomplishments and the challenges that we're facing in each, or the areas that we haven't made a lot of progress on. And so I kind of share some of just the highlighted projects that we've done. And then for the challenges, a common theme across all 4 sectors is just capacity and resources to move certain things forward. So that's reflected in what I share.
Mhm.
So there could be a connection there.
Seems worthy. I don't know
Yeah.
if I don't know if it's a committee discussion topic or if that's sort of sufficient for you all to make sure you raise that.
Yeah, I guess,
No.
Neil, do you have any, do you want any input from this group?
I guess that's like the format of these quarterly updates have changed a lot, and then there's been times where you've been out, so we've given an update more as a committee, and what they've asked of committees has been different every time. So I'm kind of also partially, like, I feel like some of the quarterly updates that we've given have really been like a quarterly update of the ECC, not of the environment, not of your role with the goal. So is the opportunity for committee participation to be in the comment section at the end? And then if that's true, then I think that would be a reasonable thing to communicate as a committee, because we've talked about the resourcing.
Yeah, your participation will be in that last bullet.
Okay.
So we'll do all the staff stuff. So I'll share all of my updates, and then we'll go right into the next staff presentation. Like, you won't speak directly as
Okay.
part of my presentation, but then at the end, there's the opportunity for the committees. And I don't know, Mary, if you know if there are other committees that will be invited to speak during this, or if it will only be.
Remember, I don't think, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I can get a little bit more clarity for you if that will be helpful.
Yeah, no, I think it's fine to, I mean, it's already on the table, the FTE
Yeah.
for this committee, we've already, city manager's already talking about that, so.
Yeah.
I think
Oh,
it's
good.
fine. Yeah, it's already been being discussed, so I think just to reiterate that that's
Yeah.
really needed.
And it came
to
up in-
achieve these goals from the committee's perspective.
Yeah.
It seems fine.
And it's a good opportunity too, because that came up with council when we had the May work session or March
Yeah,
work
it did come
session.
up in the
So
last
I
work
think
session
that's a
too.
good opportunity to reiterate from the council or from the committee perspective.
Because we were thinking about even able to be relatively specific in terms of the things that could be accomplished on these environment climate goals that can't with only one FTE.
Yeah, that would be great to get specific like that.
Are there any other things that
Specific
you
things
shared?
to raise.
Yeah.
It sounds like, Mark, you were planning to maybe talk about it later in the agenda on the subcommittee
Maybe,
updates, but
yeah,
I was
maybe.
thinking in that FTE discussion, if there might be good context for the whole committee today to talk about what we talked about in the transportation
Yeah.
subcommittee.
So we might revisit this
Okay.
later on the agenda.
That sounds great.
Okay. Cool. Okay, are we ready to move on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Those are all your updates. Oh, actually, Covey came off video mute. Did you have a comment, Covey? And I also saw Smita, we were able to add as a panelist, so welcome to the meeting online, Smita.
I didn't have a specific comment. I was just in support of the FD discussion as well. It sounds like we're going to have that later, so I can wait.
Great. Okay. Cassie and Renee,
Okay, so we wanted to circle back on the communications discussion we had last meeting. Included in the agenda was a summary and kind of a creative brief format from the themes that we heard from you all at that last meeting. So hopefully you all had a chance to review that. And in a minute, we'd like to hear your feedback on if you felt like that captured what we talked about. And there are some follow-up questions that were included in there that if we have time to, we can further explore today too. But I first wanted to just kind of share my thoughts on what some next steps could be for all of the interest in outreach and education. And after kind of hearing all the different things that the committee members are interested in, to me, it started to take shape as like, there are some short-term things that we can do with our existing city channels and our existing resources to really improve our outreach and education efforts and meet some of the goals that you all want. And then I think some of the things that we heard seem like more long-term actions that involve just creating new types of channels. And I think in a lot of cases, may require a little bit more capacity than we currently have. And so I kind of wanted to break those pieces up so that we are able to move forward, because I think we can do some meaningful stuff within the existing structures that we have. But I don't want to forget that you all had a lot of ideas that are good ideas that we should be moving towards, but it might just be a little bit of a long-term timeline. So some of the short-term ideas that I thought we could move forward with is really to do a big overhaul of the climate action pages on the city's website. And then once we do that, we also have our social media channels. We have our city monthly newsletter. And then we have the CCAP story map, which I've actually just finally am in the process of finishing now. And then we also have one additional resource that I'm pretty sure I emailed to you all. It's like a one-pager that we put together when we were making the CCAP. So those are channels that we have available to us that we can just kind of refresh and start putting a lot of the content out there that we heard from you all. And so I think the website to me seems kind of like the first focal point, because I think it has the farthest to go. We really haven't been good about keeping our website updated. And it also allows for the most amount of content. So I was seeing that as kind of a place that we could build out, and then we can, once we have the content in there, it's easy to kind of pull pieces from that and adapt it into social media or the newsletter or whatever those other whatever the other channels are. And so the way that, as far as how we get there, the steps that I was proposing is that I can kind of come to you all very soon, like in your next working group meetings, with kind of a website framework, like our ideas around what would an updated page structure be on the website and where different types of content would live, especially now that I've heard some of the ideas of the types of content that you want. And then really you would be working with each working group to start developing that content. And in some cases, it's kind of varied by working group. In some cases, the working groups are ready and they have content that they would like to propose that we can kind of work from. And in some cases, I think working groups are identifying different topics that they would like content on, that they would like either me to create as staff. Theoretically, we could use a third party to create some of that content too. And so it would really be spending the next month or two working with the working groups to get that content developed. And then we would basically just go through a review and iteration process of that. So once we do kind of the first version with the working groups, I can kind of adapt it for the websites. I can have the communications department look at it and get their feedback on it, and then bring it back to the working groups one more time to be like, okay, this is the content and this is going to go. And I think we could do that over just a couple of months. It kind of depends on some of the working groups' own priorities and how much you want to spend your time talking about content versus moving some of the other projects forward. But that's what I propose as kind of where we start with. And then from there, we can, in additional working group meetings, just pick like which elements of that do we want to adapt into social media or the newsletter, and the story map and the one pager I saw is kind of the third phase of that in terms of priority. So that's how I would recommend moving forward with the outreach work, and then longer term, I think some of the, based on the types of things that you were talking about in the work session, some additional channels that we think could be beneficial would be to do an actual like newsletter specific to our climate action work, which we're able to do. Individual departments can have their own newsletters. We heard a lot of interest in kind of these bigger campaigns where we're coming up with visual graphics and kind of having catchy messaging and more like direct calls to action. That's kind of more inspirational. I think we can include some of that stuff in the website, but some of what you were talking about was more of like a campaign or kind of timed with certain events. And so we think we can get there, but it just, it feels like a little bit longer term because I think we could use more capacity to do that well. And also just feeling like we need the kind of basic website framework will really, by building that out, we can pull off like a more comprehensive campaign much more easily. And then potentially even expanding into being able to do more events outreach, whether that's tabling at events or whatever else that might look like. So those are ideas that I felt like were reflected in some of the interests of the committee that we can work towards, but again, longer term. And most likely contingent on additional staff capacity. So that's something that, you know, we can talk about with that FTE discussion as well. So the next steps for that is that the creative brief that was attached to the memo, some of the follow-up questions in there would kind of inform a little bit more of that bigger picture. So I would suggest that we first focus on the short-term strategies and then kind of come back to the bigger picture campaign. But if we really wanted to continue exploring that, we can use that creative brief document and continue building it out so that we can, you know, continue making progress on that. But I do think that by building the website, we'll make progress on it anyway. And so to me, it makes the most sense to just be like, let's focus on the website for the next couple months and then build from there. So that's what I suggest. And I'd love to hear any thoughts or feedback on that approach. And then I'll pull up the creative brief too and just see if you guys have any follow-up. And Renee, do you have any additional follow-up questions?
No questions. I just, I agree with Cassie's approach that the website, we really need to shore up some of these foundational communication platforms before we launch into any sort of campaign, because everything will drive back to the website.
Mhm.
So it's a really great place to start with being very clear on what we want to communicate. And then Cassie brought up another good point related to the campaign, which we still believe has possibly a time and place for, but is that aligned with an event? You know, what's the time frame for the campaign? What's the goal? If it's to increase awareness, you know, how long does that last? You know, I've seen so many times organizations develop a campaign 6 weeks, 3 months, and then it goes away. And so that doesn't really feel like a good use of resources. So it should be centered around something, or consider how can it have a longer shelf life to make sure we're accomplishing and achieving those goals.
And that's where, like, to me, it feels contingent upon additional capacity, because I think what would be great is when you're doing a campaign is having some plan for like follow-up, whether that's like measuring success or whatever it is. Like if you're doing a campaign and it's trying to get people to take action of some kind, it's better if there is capacity to then follow up. People are like, hey, actually, I have a question about that. How can I take action? And then we can connect them to resources, and we have like a person that can help them with that sort of thing. So it feels like it will just be a lot more meaningful if we're making sure it's supported by additional capacity rather than just like, you know, a series of whatever the channels that we use are, and then goes away without any further thought.
Does the city ever do anything with classrooms or assemblies at the schools around here? I mean, just having kids in public elementary school here right now, they have a lot of events and speakers that will come in, and it does feel like teaching elementary age kids about climate week.
Yeah, that's what she said.
Oh, sorry. I was just sort of, maybe that's a side thing, but
No, that's a
Yeah.
good question. We just wanted Renee to sit at the table so that she can be in the microphone.
I'm not sure nothing I've worked on, has that taken place? I know that we have student groups come to City Hall for tours, or talk to the mayor or council members, but that's certainly a program we could look at. Yeah, I also have kids in schools and I have a middle schooler and she said that a bunch of business leaders came yesterday to talk about what they do.
That's what I was thinking. I hear about those more and more, and then it does trickle back to the parents as well.
Absolutely.
And it will occasionally happen as one-offs, like I've been asked to come into classrooms.
Yeah.
Every now and
Have
again.
gone, I think Michael's, we've gone and done different things.
Yeah.
The Utilities department, we have different groups that have gone on topics, the water department. has
Definitely
gone
water,
to,
yeah.
Schools.
And I think they do tours maybe at the Outback, don't
I
they?
think they do as well.
Yeah, at our water filtration
And a
facility.
department.
And the reclamation facilities.
Oh,
did
cool.
tours too.
My son has a tour at the landfill on Monday.
Oh, great. Oh, yeah.
So I know a little bit on topic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know that, the environmental center does a lot of schools work.
Oh,
And I don't know how that's different now that Jackie's role is permanently in the schools, but I think even though I know in the past, like our water department has sponsored educational programs that the environmental center will run, so it's sometimes it's through a partnership like that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and similarly, like Deschutes County Solid Waste landfill tours. Sometimes the environmental center run, and those, just as a fun anecdote in filtering. Those are kid tours, but the parent volunteers were so into it and asked so many questions that we started running adult landfill tours and they always sell out.
So maybe that is who, like, my kids, they're probably doing it through the environment center. You all run the landfill tours?
Potentially, it's not my department,
Yeah.
but, yeah. I saw Smita raise her hand too.
them doing it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a kid in high school and just today she was asking me about giving a presentation about my work, both my personal work and then also work on this committee to a group of high school students for their environmental club. So I think maybe part of this work can include developing materials or presentation materials for us to present on the ECC work at schools.
Kind of bringing it back to the, outreach, kind of tiered strategy that Cassie had recommended. Laura looks
I
like
have
she has
one
thought.
question, yeah, are there any pieces in that creative brief process, like the tone or sort of like key messaging that would be helpful to sort of at least have somewhat landed for the short-term pieces, and do you have what you need from the session we did, or is there any follow-ups that we should do?
That's a really good question. Let me pull it up. I didn't look at it from that framework, so I don't have answers off the top of my head. I don't know if you do, Renee, or specific pieces that we wanted to explore further.
I believe we have enough to get started on the content for the website, along with the work groups and the content that they will be developing. A lot of the questions that we might still need some answers on are specific to target audience and what they think now or what we want them to think. And then around tonality, as far as, do we want it to be a straightforward message or an inspirational message? On our website, we have a headline, if you will, above the introductory copy of what the work is. And Cass and I both believe that that should be a very straightforward message. We can weave in some calls to action. So to answer your question, I believe what we have, as we work through the content with the work group, there will be an opportunity to provide more feedback, edit, etc.
And I think to Renee kind of mentioned this, but when I'm just looking through the creative brief now, and most of the follow-up questions, I think, was kind of getting clearer on what the target audience is and what we want the target audience to take away, because we talked about a lot of different ideas and we kind of mentioned all the potential target audiences. And I think it'll become more clear when we're like working with specific channels. So if we're like, okay, on this specific website page, the audience is general community members, maybe we have a section of it that's targeted to businesses. So then, so I think that's the part that needs to be fleshed out a little bit more, but probably will happen as when we're working more specifically on it.
Correct. The other recommendation is to have messaging for the work that the committee is doing that works for waste, transportation, and energy, then there's also an opportunity to have specific messaging for those 3 areas. We want them all to hang together. So if someone sees a message about waste and then they see a message about energy, they know that they are efforts of this committee and this work.
And I wish I had thought of this when we did the workshop last month, but when we developed the CCAP, we do actually have like a vision statement. So I intend to use what we have from the development of the CCAP for some of that, kind of all-encompassing messaging, like you and I haven't even talked about that, Renee, but, we do have some of that. So I think that's probably kind of where I'll start framing that, and then you all can review it. And if we start hearing in the working groups that all of you guys are like, no, this doesn't feel right anymore, then we can look at revisiting that. But I don't anticipate that happening. It was pretty universal, and it did have kind of an inspiring tone when because when we started the CCAP, we went through like the first couple of months, we're setting like, what is the vision? What are we doing here? So.
I was wondering, in the later steps, you talked about there being the opportunity to start a newsletter or something like that. And was wondering if we already had or could at least start a like interested party list, like the email gathering component of it while we do this website refresh. And I don't know if we already have that, but it seems like if that's something we're going to do in the future, that's, I think, a valuable asset for us to be able to communicate in some ways broader public, but that broader public communication can happen from saying we're presenting to council about this, we're giving our quarterly update, or things that aren't a newsletter but are timely updates. That list building could happen sooner than the newsletter actually gets developed. And maybe there's nothing, and maybe we leave a note that says this is just gathering.
And we
Or
did.
do we already have it?
Well, we have a list
Okay.
that we started in 2018, because we did keep people updated for, like, they would even just get meeting notifications every time we set a climate action steering committee meeting. So I haven't looked at that list since 2019 probably. So we can maybe, with the communications team help, we can like look at that list and figure out, like, if no one has signed up on that list for 3 years, then maybe we just like get rid of that and start a new one. If people have signed up more recently, I don't know, I can talk with you guys if it makes sense, to what extent it makes sense to use like an old outdated list. So that we have a base, or if it just makes sense to start something new.
Yeah. Or communicate out to that group and say,
We're starting a new list.
Yeah. I don't know.
Or also include on our Bend Current monthly newsletter an opportunity to sign up if you'd like more specific information. We can also post it on social media, encouraging people to sign up.
Yeah, I know that's helpful, and there's a million lists. Every project has an update list, and
in the Bend Current newsletter, that is broken up into the different council goal areas. So there's a section this is correct, right? That in each newsletter, there's an environment and climate section. And so I've been trying to get better about utilizing that newsletter. And we already have programmed in some waste prevention messaging for that newsletter, which is we need to do even just to meet our opportunity to recycle requirements. So that's a channel that we have now. And so some of the stuff that you mentioned might just fit into there already. And yeah, that's a place where we can just kind of start getting the word out.
That's a great channel to know that we have. Is that monthly?
It is.
Okay. And you like updates like the day before you're sending it out, right? Just kidding.
We usually send it at the end of the month following, and we include what took place at the council meetings. And as Cass said, it's organized by council goal. So we try to include a story related to each goal of what took place that month. We also have a place to talk about what's coming up.
Okay.
Yeah, like not everything will be a good fit for that, but we can, it's something that we can figure out.
I was gonna comment on the creative brief draft.
Right.
And I had to leave last month's meeting early, so I was kind of holding my tongue in case it had already been discuss, but I think I have clarity on my question after hearing kind of your plan, Renee. But my feedback after reading through this was how we're going to tailor some of the strategies here more directly to some of the CCAP actions. And it sounds like that's like the phase 2 part where we will work in the subcommittees or work groups to think about that.
Correct.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Sounds good.
And that's something that we can start immediately. So like the waste and materials group, that's actually already, we had planned for our next meeting is to focus on that. And then the energy working group, we've kind of started talking about that because some of the members have actually started developing content. So we're gonna start reviewing that. We haven't talked about it with the transportation group, is the one group that we've just talked less about it. But given this plan, it would be great if we can, at our next
Yeah.
meeting, start brainstorming some of those things, at least just getting like the ideas out there, and then I can maybe come back to you guys with some content.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Got some ideas.
perfect. Yeah, start writing them down, and yeah, we'll talk about them at the next meetings.
Is there anything now on this being sort of a clearinghouse for other related programs that don't actually fall under the environment client? I'm thinking sort of the utilities, for example, like the turf retrofit pilot right now, things like that, and other, say, conservation related. It seems like, and even people are wondering about recycling information. I was trying to look, see, I can't remember if we have much in the way of sort of linking to other things right now, but if it became a place that people go and they're not sure what program or department they should look, I realize that could get a little
Well,
unwieldy.
it's a good question. It's definitely like, as I'm thinking about kind of like that master framework of how it's structured, I'll be thinking about that, like in terms of just whether you call it natural resource work or sustainability work, or like how those things fit together. So that's kind of one of the pieces that I need to think about. We do have water conservation web pages, I'm sure already,
Yeah.
right?
Correct. And they're working on a campaign right now.
That's what I was thinking.
So as we look at reorganizing our website, I see an opportunity. Because you're right, people are not necessarily not gonna know where to go, but if you're on water conservation, there could be a link to the work you're all doing and vice versa.
Yeah.
If there's not one place that talks about everything. So,
And we are doing like the bigger complete website overhaul like next year or something, right? So I think
We
some
are.
of those questions will be answered when we do that.
yes, yes. So right now we're looking at how to edit existing pages and do the work that you're all gonna do. So thank you, you're helping. And then a replatforming, a new look, with the goal of making it easier to navigate and for our community to find things. I think we have 977 pages currently. It's a lot of pages.
Yeah, so there might be like some of it now, it might just be like, okay, it's not a perfect fit for now because we're gonna do that. And if we change the whole platform, like it only makes sense to spend so much time on that, but
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think just like from a general people that don't operate in the city structure, it doesn't make, I don't care that that's this department versus that
Right.
department. This is the topic area that I'm
Right.
interested in, and that can be confusing to navigate.
Right, and people search subjects, they don't search departments.
Right.
So we'll make sure that that search ability will work for people searching by subject.
Or they search on Google and then end up.
Right. That happens more often than not.
Yeah.
I would just like to add on the creative brief process in the workshop we had last time. It was a really good exercise. And this work takes time.
Mhm.
So just want to thank you for all of your comments and feedback, and just that we will continue getting more clear with our communication, but it really helped Cassie and I develop a plan to move forward.
yeah.
So.
I also had a question with the process that we talked about last time in the creative brief, just what of the, I guess, what's in our current tiers and what we talked about as like general communication, some of the later goals, what of that is currently within city, like what channels, and what of that is within current city capacity versus do we have to budget for?
Well, I have that, let me pull my slides back up because I tried to capture that.
Yeah, I saw it
slide.
somewhere in there, and I know some of it is just like, there's capacity, meaning this just can't happen until capacity comes back up, but then there's other things that are capacity as in, this is not within the resources that we have available, so we have to pay for.
Yeah.
Like, we don't own a billboard, so we can't just like get on the schedule. That's something you have to pay for.
Oh, so some of those, so I guess from my perspective, the short-term channels are things that we have like immediate access to right now, which is website or social media, the story map, the newsletter, and then that one pager. And then I didn't go as specific, so maybe Renee, you can provide some more insight on some of those like more community like advertisement type channels. But for the long-term channels, like the newsletter and the campaigns and the outreach events, the main limitation there is more like the staff capacity part of that. And then, is there something more specific you want to know about like the costs of billboards and advertisement prints?
Not necessarily that specific, like I'm assuming that any of those channels that we talked about where you're actually, I don't know, when you're actually
You like
paying
purchase,
for
yeah.
outside things that you have to pay for that, but in terms of like, is everything else that we're talking about that's internal just a scheduling and prioritization, not something that is
Correct.
okay?
So our owned channels within the city are our website, social media, and the newsletter.
Mhm.
And there is capacity to include messaging and stories and communication on all three of those channels.
And that like design, working with whatever capacity and constraints is something that we do with staff, not something that we have to.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. We introduced this morning to our leadership team some social media content themes and direction. And as Cassie wrote on the short-term list, one area is called a did you know? So we are working with different departments to include information about all the things the city does and some background information, things that a lot of the community members just aren't familiar with. So there's a great opportunity for this type of messaging to fit into that series.
I almost wish you could do the presentation you gave earlier today, right now, but I won't ask you to do
Okay.
that. It was good. They just unveiled kind of like a social media like look, feel, and strategy for all of our city work, and it was good because it's kind of updating our approach to social media in a way that they were calling it like humanizing the city, and I think a lot of it is a much better fit for a lot of the stuff that you guys were talking about at our last month's workshop to fit into that.
Yeah. So the overall strategy is, as Cassie said, humanizing the city and the people and the work that we all do and the community members. So we've looked at 5 different content themes or subject matters. So one was a did you know? And that can talk about waste, we can talk about transportation fee, we can talk about so many different things. And then one was photography. We live in a beautiful place. So why not feature a photograph of, Mount Bachelor and, Good Morning Bend. So there's also an opportunity to weave in messaging around the work that you all do. The sky is blue. We don't live in a foggy place. Also looking at some humor, some illustrations. So we can certainly send that presentation out if you'd like to.
I would think that would be cool just
So,
to show,
yeah.
because also I think we have a lot of like pretty incredible like design capacity in-house that I expect that I think our team has become like really robust in that recently, and I was really impressed by a lot of that stuff. It made me excited about the possibilities.
Good.
Yeah.
And I see Covey has his hand raised as well.
Yeah, I had a very specific question, I think, in relation to something you just mentioned, Neil, earlier about the short-term channels. And Cassie, you mentioned we have the capacity for kind of the things listed there on the short-term channels. I think the only thing I wanted clarity on was for the one pager. In my mind, I think that's something we're going to be working on. And then I think we've talked about like having that mailed out to all city residents. I just want to see if that we have the budget for, or if that's like part of what you're mentioning, or if that's separate.
That would be a little separate. The one pager that I was referencing is just that we have an existing one pager that was created when we created the CCAP. And so I just wanted to let you all know that that's something that we can kind of easily update if we're keeping it more or less in a similar format. We can update that, and that's an additional channel that we have. The way it is structured right now, it's not really like intended to be a mailer. It doesn't really make sense to just mail out as is. So if we wanted to do something like a mailer, that would be probably its own future project. And then to actually do the mailing, we would also need a budget and to do the mailing itself.
Okay, I definitely confused that. I thought that was the same thing that we will be working on, that we've talked about, especially with the waste materials group, but I think also other groups.
I didn't write it as specifically, but in the long-term channels, I wrote I was thinking about a mailer being most appropriate kind of during a campaign, so that it's not just like a random mailer that you get one time, but as part of some sort of campaign that with, like associated messaging. And so I kind of put that as a sub bullet of a future when we're doing campaigns, and that may include something like mailers or purchase advertisements. So something like a billboard, like kind of, I was kind of putting those in the same category of when we might use one of those things. But that's not to say we can't, if you all have a different idea and want to use a mailer outside of a specific campaign, we can continue to discuss that as well. But that's just where I have it, that's where I had it reflected in this kind of action plan of when we would consider something like a mailer.
Gotcha. That makes sense. I think I'm just approaching it from, if it's possible, I think from the waste and materials group, that was one of our priority actions, was to start doing some of the educational outreach. And I think in my mind, at least, we were hoping to see if we can still get something like a one pager with like a lot of, like a visual mailer, like you're mentioning, but that also, people can take action on, and if other members of the group want to correct me, but in my mind, at least, was something we're planning to do this year if possible. And Smita, I actually see you. I don't know who all is there from our group, but let me know if I got that wrong.
I missed the last conversation with the waste materials group, but I'm kind of questioning a little bit if we want to do a mailer as a waste materials committee.
I was thinking about that.
Great point.
Okay, we can talk, I guess, separately on the waste materials working group for that. I think my understanding was that it was going to be the whole CCAP from the different sectors, and there were education outreach pieces for each of the sectors. And we had talked about it as a committee, I think previously, about sending something with all the information out to everybody that makes it really accessible. Maybe they can put it on their fridge, with some of those actions that people just don't know about, or providing more information.
Does the city currently do any new change of address, new resident communication?
Not that I'm aware of. Do you know, Mary? I don't think so. Mm-mm. Most of that, exactly, most of that communications to the utilities department. And we do have the ability to do a bill stuffer.
Mhm.
And then also on the digital bills, we can include a message as well.
I've clicked on those links before.
Good.
I'm
And what was your experience? Did it work? Did it look good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always just curious about what's
Mhm.
being communicated out in
Mhm.
programs.
Yeah.
And you don't get that when you don't get a physical bill.
Right. So we can include just words, but recently we included some imagery and words. So.
And Cubby, I guess my thought within this framework as far as prioritization was that what I'm proposing is that we do just focus on the website and then social media as a first step. And then once we get through that, if we want to consider a next step like a mailer, we can consider that at that time. It just seems from a prioritization standpoint, it will be easier for us to pull off a mailer once we've gone through all the development for the website.
Mhm.
It seems tricky to me to try to develop a mailer before we have even a comprehensive understanding of all the different types of things that we're trying to say. And then also realistically from a capacity standpoint, we really can't work on both of those things at the same time and all of the other things that we're working on at the same time. So I do feel strongly we need to just kind of pick one thing. So that's kind of my point of proposing today, is that we focus on the website first, and then I think social media is kind of an easy add-on to that. I propose that we did the story map and the one pager next, if we want to do a mailer instead of focusing on the story map and the one pager. After the website, that's fine. Maybe we can revisit that, but I think it may take us quite a while to even get the website built out. So my proposal is that we kind of focus in on doing that now, and then we can figure out which channel makes the most sense next.
I'll also add, building out the website is gonna be really helpful with just general attention to the CCAP process, since we're gonna be updating it.
Yeah.
So anytime we're doing or communicating out about events or anything related to the CCAP, it's all gonna be on the website, and landing somewhere where we have good resources is a great spot for that. Rather than, our website still has great information, but our CCAP's old too, so it's all
Yeah.
focused around that.
And a mailer would have, like to Renee's point earlier, like it would link you back to the website. So if we don't have the website built out yet, then that's a little bit problematic.
I think that makes sense, Cassie. I think maybe the misunderstanding I had was you mentioned that there is a one pager that's already being created to meet the OTR requirements. And I know the county, then the Rethink Waste project has worked with the county on getting that created as well. So I thought this was going to be something similar. That was going to be a one pager that would be both available on the website, but also mailed out. So it wasn't like a whole separate mailer created, but it had a lot of the same content. And I thought what we had discussed as a committee previously was to make it something that was easily digestible and visually appealing, but had not just waste and materials content, but all the sectors, kind of all the work that CCAP is doing, but it's more about what can you do in an easy way of like, here are some quick steps you can take if you want to be more sustainable or take action, climate action.
The one pager that is part of our opportunity to recycle compliance is the one pager that the Environmental Center was developing on behalf of the county. Is that what you're referring to, Cubby?
I thought it was going to be basically a separate version of that was not limited to just waste and materials actions. So yes, I did think it was similar to that, but not exactly the same.
So I think what you're describing still fits with my previous statement about when and how we'd focus on that. So we could do a mailer. We're not in the process of creating a mailer. We have a different one pager that it just already exists, but we're not using it anywhere. So we might be able to adapt that to be a mailer. It was meant to be more of like when you go to events, like a handout that you give out at events. So I still think that creating a mailer like what you're describing would be a second step after the website and social media.
I understand that. I think I'm just sharing my perspective, which is from my understanding from the waste and materials working group was that because we were prioritizing all the educational outreach actions as a number one priority for this year, I thought the first step for that was that one pager that would then get mailed out to everybody. So I'm just trying to see if there's a way to have the priorities for the committee as a whole on the waste materials still work communications wise, or if I'm sensing a disconnect where one doesn't exist.
Okay, yeah, and so you're sharing that from the waste and materials perspective, you would like to see a mailer happen sooner than waiting until after the website is complete.
That was my understanding. I don't want to speak for the whole working group, but yes, that's been my understanding on all the meetings we had, is that was one of the first priority actions I thought we had talked about doing that fit a lot of the actions on waste materials. And we, through our prioritization exercise, made that number one priority for the year. So I just thought that was what we had discussed. And that's why I want to open the opportunity for anyone to correct me if they can.
And I think Serena and Alex, who are the other half of the working group, are not present today, so.
And Kelly as well?
And Kelly, yeah, Kelly's not here.
Okay, I can't see everyone in the room, so okay, that's helpful. Okay, so we can talk about it separately, I think, Cassie, maybe with the waste materials group, working group as a whole.
Okay, I'm sensing from the general group comfort with this focus on the website first. So I think as far as like, just not that you guys made a formal decision right now, but as far as direction I'm hearing from you all, that we're comfortable moving forward with this approach.
I think it also allows a little bit more flexibility than if you're actually printing and sending. It can be more iterative on the web.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the hope, is that like the website is a more flexible, more comprehensive tool, and then all the other channels are much easier because a lot of that a lot of the content's been created, and then you make it, you shrink the content down to fit whatever tool you have.
I just only read the mail I have to read. I just get so much mail that I don't.
Recycle the rest.
Yeah, so and that's a discussion we can have if we're getting closer to being on the cusp of sending something like a mail route.
I like the magnet idea. I mean, something that's
Mhm.
as information and usable.
I think I just wanted to add to that's why I've been not calling it a mailer, but a one pager, but just something that's more handy, like an informational poster almost. That's like more handy versus just like a mailer that goes in the trash. That's at least what I envision as well when we've been talking about it. But that sounds good, Cassie.
Okay, thanks, Cubby.
Right, do we feel like we have a good kind of grasp on general communications plan and this section of the agenda? Okay, there will be lots more to come, so not the
Thank you.
end, only the beginning. Thanks so much.
Thank you so
Renee,
much.
for
Yeah. Well, I think this is a good as time as any to take our lunch break. Great.
That's great.
Okay.
Good.
Great. We will make sure that we are actually connected before we start talking. We're not gonna make that mistake again, folks that are online.
And we'll do about a 10-minute break.
Yeah.
Okay. Turns out that week, like every meeting in the council chambers was having serious issues, so that wasn't just us.
Okay.
They had like replaced the whole computer or something.
Are we
It
muted?
happened. Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
All right, we are in theory back online if Cubby or Smita. If you hear us.
Yes, we
All
can
right.
hear you. All right,
Great.
can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you. Thanks.
So we're gonna jump back in and talk about the work session that happened in March around natural gas and electrification. So Cassie, take it away.
Yeah, so I wanted to just share with you all, I know that we've talked about this process a few times here, but by the time it went to the council, it had evolved yet again. So now that we evolved it, we talked to the council and we're moving forward with this as proposed. So I wanted to just make you all aware of what we're doing and what the timeline is for that project. And we can just discuss how the council meeting went and everything. So I'm just gonna go through a couple of the slides that I shared with the council that outline the process. So we kind of reframed it and breaking it up into a two-step process where we're really trying to understand kind of the universe of options that we have, because part of the challenge with the scope is that it was really broad. It was like, what are all the different things we can do with electrification? And then we need to like analyze them. So what we decided to do is first just figure out that part about like what options do we have to promote electrification, looking at you know, from the voluntary to the regulatory and kind of everything in between, and then come back to council with that information and then get direction from them on which of those policy options they are actually interested in, and then doing the deeper analysis on a narrower set of policies so that we can just make sure that that deeper analysis is scoped appropriately and it's an efficient use of our resources, so that we're basically just, we're not spending a ton of time analyzing things that we might not even move forward with. So step one is really this understand what the options are. And so that is going to be more of like a best practices review of the range of options. So we want to look at what different options there are, but particularly we're looking for where have other cities actually seen success with some of these options versus what are maybe things that we can move forward with in theory, and just kind of trying to understand where people have actually been able to move the dial. And then so in that first level, it's just like, what are the options? And then some really high level information about like, what is the potential greenhouse gas benefit? What are the potential kind of scale of costs? And then what are the potential legal risks or considerations that need to be understood? So we won't necessarily be doing a deep understanding of what those are, but kind of characterizing like, well, what are the legal questions that the areas of uncertainty and what we need to dig further on. We will do some stakeholder interviews as part of this process. One of those stakeholder interviews will be the ECC Natural Gas Working Group. And then that's kind of as far as we get. And then we go to council, like I said, with that information, we ask them which policies or programs they want to continue investigating. If there's any that we just want to take off the table for now because they're infeasible or they're just impractical or they're not that effective. And then also at the end of step one, we're hoping that in that best practices analysis, we can identify a handful of options that we can move forward with as short-term actions that don't necessarily need that whole deeper level of investigation, and it's something that we can actually move forward with in the next biennium. So when we come to the council at the end of step one, it's like, this is what we're analyzing further. This is what we're just going to commit to doing, you know, in the next budget cycle. And then these are the ones that we can just put to the side for now. And so the timeline for that's the part that we're starting now, where the procurement is underway. We should have someone under contract for that by mid-May and can start that research. And then, oh yeah, this is the part that I forgot to say as part of step one, is that when we go to the council, we intend to use the Environment and Climate Committee to look at that analysis and then make a recommendation to council on what they should move forward with. So in the process, we're doing the procurement now. We'll do kind of all the information and fact finding in the first part of the summer. And then by the end of the summer, so either starting in August or September, we'll have discussions with the ECC to present that information to you and then have you guys make a recommendation that we'll take to council and take that recommendation to council in October. So that's something that's now kind of on your guys' work plan. And if the natural gas subgroup wants to work on some of that stuff, you know, prepare some of that stuff for the full committee, we can talk about if we have time and capacity to do that. But the full committee will need to be making the recommendation to the council. So I had a slide just on the types of policies and programs that we'll be looking at, including different incentives, disincentives, so kind of two sides of the same coin there. We have proposed city level commitments around operations and city facilities, which I'll come back to. Different ways we can support statewide policy, looking at decarbonizing the natural gas supply with alternative fuel sources, and then restrictions and requirements. And that's not necessarily an exhaustive list. That was just to kind of put an idea out there of the types of things that we can look at. And then step 2 will be a deeper dive into like a smaller number of some of those ideas that we just know we need a lot more information on. So that's where we'll be looking at like what are the actual greenhouse gas impacts of this policy using local data. So less like theoretically and more like, okay, let's match that up to our actual development numbers or whatever it is and figure out what the greenhouse gas impacts could be, trying to get more clear on the costs. I know that defining the cost can be defined a lot of different ways, but we'll try to figure out what the right way is to define those for these narrower set of policies and then assess those. And then we'll also need to do, that's where we'll do a much deeper dive into like what the legal risks are, particularly on some of the regulatory strategies that people are interested in, really understanding like what the implications and considerations would be there. So the scope for that step is, it'll be a lot more clear once we know which policies we're actually looking at. And then we'll work, the way we're doing the procurement is we'll hire one consultant now who will do both phases, but we'll work with them to like scope that second phase of it, kind of collaboratively with them once they're on board and once we know what those policies are. So then we'll go back to council and so for this part, instead of just using the ECC, this is the part where we feel like we really do need some more targeted kind of industry input and community input. So for the second step, this is where we anticipate using some other type of stakeholder engagement. It might be an ad hoc advisory committee, kind of like the tree code. It might be a different format. We're going to try to figure that out once we know what policies we're looking at, but they'll go through their own process. And then that body will be the one who make the recommendations to council about which to actually move forward with. So it takes a little bit longer because we have that more expansive stakeholder engagement. So that one we're anticipating we would launch after phase 1. So it would start in November and December. And then we would do this deeper dive analysis on the prioritized policies. We're expecting that to take kind of the winter timeline, and then that whatever that stakeholder engagement looks like would happen next summer, we think. And this is a rough timeline, like it kind of like it'll vary based on how it's going on the discussion. So this is just kind of our thoughts on what is a most likely a realistic timeline of how these things tend to play out. But hopefully we can do it a little bit faster. You just never really know. And then we would be bringing that recommendation to the council like next summer. And they would be moving forward with something.
Can you flip back one quickly? What was the end of step 1 timing?
The end of step 1 is this October.
Thanks.
So that'll be like the heavy ECC time will be August, September, and October when you guys are hearing the information, developing a recommendation, and then bringing that to the council. And then it's also good to keep in mind with this step 2 phase, we will also be ideally moving forward with some of the short-term action items.
Is there any need to coordinate that with some of the board members' terms? Because I think we're all appointed, or committee members' terms, I think it's a 2-year appointment. So am I wrong?
They're 4-year appointments.
Oh, it is, okay.
I don't think we have anyone, I'd have to look. I don't actually think we have anyone up this fall.
Okay, I thought it was 2 years.
Yeah.
Good enough.
It was,
We're
in the
still doing
beginning,
first.
it was 2 and 4 staggered, so then you wouldn't end up with everybody leaving after 4 years.
But that's why now there are
But now
more 2-year
everybody
terms,
is in,
yeah,
it's been,
they are staggered,
so
yeah.
every
Okay.
other year.
Good, that was my question.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons that we stagger them is so that we don't have to worry too much about it because I think we typically try to continue the work to the extent that we can, but yeah, I'll double check that just to see if there's any awkwardness with that timing, but I didn't think we had anyone up this year.
It doesn't sound like it. It's
Yeah.
just something that came into mind there.
Yeah. And then we also, we'll try to do, since we're trying to do a more expanded public engagement, we intend to do like a project website with status and updates, knowing that there's going to be a lot of interest. And it's possible that the council, as we go through the process, the council will want to add some additional public engagement that happens with things like the TUF and the tree code. As we kind of get in and we start hearing feedback from the community, we'll sometimes add additional engagement opportunities to kind of fit whatever the need that's been identified. So that's what I shared with them, and I'd like any just questions or feedback, but I guess some of the, just to debrief the work session, is that the main feedback that we got was, I think there was general support for moving forward with this process, but a lot of the counselors, like I'm sure you all feel, would like us to move faster and just to see us, just acknowledging that the timeline looks long. And so a lot of the discussion was around that, like kind of what goes into the time and how can we shorten it. And so one of the things that they pulled out is the city level commitments around operations and city facilities is something that we are already doing. We have, through our strategic energy management plan, we have a commitment to building all of our new facilities to be net zero or net zero ready, which typically, leads towards electrifying. And we're building our Juniper Ridge Public Works facility we're building right now, and that we did actually design that to not have any natural gas. And then our next big facility project is going to be a new city hall. And we have the same goals. And so we had a discussion about how we're kind of already doing that. And if we're already doing that, does that really need to be looked at in this analysis, or can we just commit to that? And so we're intending to, they signaled that they would like to adopt a resolution that kind of formalizes our commitment. So we already kind of have a policy about that because it's in our strategic energy management plan, but that's adopted by the city manager and more of an internal document. So the council was interested in potentially adopting a resolution that kind of formalizes that commitment and puts some council weight behind it and makes it more public. So we are planning on bringing a proposal when I go do the quarterly check-in next week, we're going to propose that to them and like a date associated with doing that. So we plan on doing that later this summer or early fall. So that was one outcome. And then a lot of the discussion also kind of centered around, since they were asking can we go faster? Or how can we go faster? Just the topic of capacity and resources came up a lot. And so there was definitely support from the council that, in order for us to do more of our climate work, that we need to allocate more resources to that. And they brought up the staffing issues as well. So I do think that there's, like Mary said, it's been discussed. So I think we'll kind of see how that evolves, but it seems like we may be able to allocate more staff resources, hopefully sooner than later. And that was largely an outcome of that discussion. So that was really nice. I don't know if Neil or Councilor Norris, if you guys have anything to add from the work session. Well,
I don't think so.
Any questions, or does anyone have any reactions to this approach? As how I know some of you have kind of seen it since I shared it with the natural gas working group, but not everybody has.
There were some of those natural gas specific things that seemed like they were maybe on a shorter time frame, like the franchise agreement and that, or anything like that specifically gone into, or this is more big picture.
Well, maybe you can speak to the franchise agreement.
So the right-of-way code was adopted, as you all know, and we've already sent Cascade Natural Gas the notice of non-renewal, so there's really nothing to do there.
Oh, okay.
Other than have them be subject to the right-of-way code.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of a non-issue. when it comes to natural
Oh, okay,
gas.
there's nothing else to do.
And we never really reported that back to you because it was just a natural, like thing that happened because of our switch to the right of way code.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it got us out of the franchise agreement cycle that there was interest in, you know, a year or two ago.
This is, I think the approach makes sense and the timeline makes sense. The piece on supporting statewide policy, it's, again, it's like adjacent, but the climate protection program reinstatement rulemaking just started. And it sounds like the public comment for that will be over the summer.
Yeah.
So I think as long as we're okay with that, like, there may need to be a separate process to develop those comments.
Yeah.
outside of-
Yeah, because that's already in the law. My understanding from the short session, I think there has been some, rather than have cities regulate, so outside of the climate protection, but rather than have cities piecemeal regulate in Oregon, natural gas, like the Washington approach was through their building code. They did some really good work statewide, which honestly would be my preference, because then it goes to, it's easier to implement it that way and less litigious in many ways. My understanding in the last legislative session is that there wasn't a huge interest to have a statewide natural gas regulatory approach to the Oregon building code, but that doesn't mean that at the long session, that wouldn't be a better time. Through LOC, you know, that could be something that we could talk about through this process, because that is still another path. In addition, because the way it is now in Oregon is that there's some good language, there's some good rulemaking, but it's still more voluntary measures than other measures, so.
Yeah, and there's a lot that Washington has done. Washington also has structures that make it easier for them to do a lot statewide, so.
And if
Thanks,
there
Megan.
isn't, if there, thank you. Oh, sorry. If there is an opportunity sooner this summer, I think going through this process doesn't necessarily preclude us from being able to do that. So thank you for flagging that, and maybe that's something we can follow up on, because I think if we want, you know, we can talk with the mayor and see if, just based on what we're commenting on and kind of the nature of it, we can see if they have, if the council or the mayor has comfort with us going ahead and making those comments. So I haven't followed that super closely right now, so.
It's just started, I think the first RAC meeting was last week or the week before.
Yeah.
I know it's gonna be like a short, they want it to be short, yeah.
Two more RAC meetings, the third one's maybe in July,
Okay.
and then it'll be open for, I mean, you can comment at any point during the RAC
Yeah.
process. And then there will be the longer public comments period on proposed rules. After that last.
Okay, cool, yeah.
So I guess that
I'll
would
think about that a little
just be
more.
helpful to clarify for, you know, that was a potential area to evaluate, but what the opportunities and timeline would look like. And where, and I'm sure it depends on what the comment is, but what do we already have passed in either goals or CCAP that is easy to comment on without, you know, like, are there some areas that are easier to comment on than others? And
Yeah.
then what's the process for how we might recommend versus somebody else might recommend to have that come from council and the mayor?
Yeah,
Just an open question. Thanks for bringing that up. And if there's more conversations, great. I just wanted to recognize Covey's had his hand up, but
I guess, just to answer
Yeah.
your question on that, I think if that's of interest for that natural gas working group, and we just want to hold a meeting to look at that and figure out what those comments are, I think that would be the best place to
Okay.
start, and then we can just, if we're able to kind of understand the substantive thoughts there, then we can probably just have a conversation with the mayor and
okay,
see what, if they feel like there needs to be. A lot of times we can engage in state, if it, you know, especially if it supports council goals and kind of
Yeah.
stated things, there doesn't always have to be like a super involved process for
Okay.
that.
yeah, that
But
may
they
be just a
actually
good thing to
feel
brainstorm what
comfortable
we
with
think
it.
the potentials might be.
One quick question, and then, sorry, Bobby, did the city comment on the last round of CPP rulemaking?
Hubby?
Yeah. I just had a question. I'm trying to, if I think you showed the timeline, and part of that was the stakeholder group for like 3 months. And so I was just trying to get an understanding. I know you said that that would be part of the stakeholder meetings once the policies were kind of like based on the policies that are under consideration. It mentions. And I know you mentioned it could be an ad hoc group like the tree code committee, or it could be something else. And I just wanted to say that 3 months sounds ambitious for how the tree code stuff went. And I'm guessing this is going to be a lot more limited, but just knowing how it takes a while for a committee to really start looking into things, and it usually ends up taking a lot more time. So I just wanted to flag that, at least from my perspective, May through July seems ambitious, but I don't know exactly how limited the scope will be for that work.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Covey, and that's something, that's why a lot of the timeline for step 2 is kind of placeholders, and part of the discussion, this was one of the benefits of breaking it up into 2 steps, was like, it will be the work of that group will be more defined and limited because we're going through this step 1 first. And then, so when we are going to the council at the end of step 1, we'll have a discussion with them about what the different stakeholder input, like what the different ways that can look like are. And then for each of the, we'll have a discussion about what that means from a timeline perspective. And that will be up to the council to decide, like what, just to weigh that and decide how much time they're willing to spend versus what type of stakeholder engagement and the implications for that. So I think that'll be a big part of our discussion when we talk to the council in the fall and scope that out a little better. We'll be like realistic. Okay. Yeah, what that would look
like.
And
I think one other point is, I know you said in the previous step, the ECC will be kind of narrowing down limitations and making a recommendation to council. And I just wonder also if it's planned for the stakeholder group to also have those same ECC voices on it as well, so that knowledge is still there for that stakeholder group. So I feel like that would
representation
to me makes it would just make sense to still have that ECC lens and voice as part of whichever group is also looking at it at that later stage.
Yeah, thank you. So the next time that you all will hear about this is that we are planning a stakeholder interview kind of earlier in the process with the natural gas working group. So my guess is that would be sometime in the early summer, June, hopefully. And then you'll hear about it all again in the fall when we're actually developing a recommendation. Okay.
Well, wouldn't we be August, September?
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. We'll have to, I think each month as we go, we're going to have to kind of like figure out with the CCAP update, the key steps for the CCAP update, and then that process, we're going to probably have to make some calls in June and July, like what we, which we tackle in each month, because there's a little bit of a convergence of some key decisions happening around those same times. And when I mapped it out, if it all worked perfectly, like we actually had space in the CCAP schedule in September to have this discussion, and maybe a little bit of time to tee it up in August. So my hope is that works out, but it's easy for things to end up getting bumped a month here and there. So
yeah,
hopefully we'll just have to feel that out. Okay. I think that's good for that agenda item then. And then
Great.
we have 20 minutes left, and we want to do working groups and then just save a few minutes for the agenda review.
Unless it's me to just took yourself off video, so I'm assuming that wasn't a pending comment. Okay, so we've had a little bit of time. Working groups, I think, have all met. So we have 3.5 to 4 minutes per working group. If anybody wants to give an update. Covey came off video mute. You want to give an update?
That was not a sign that I was ready to give an update.
I don't think any of the groups assigned anyone, so I'm gonna be looking for one.
I'll review over notes while someone else takes the lead.
Well, in the transportation working group, we met a couple weeks ago now. And had a pretty thorough discussion about the EV readiness plan and moving forward with that. And a lot of healthy back and forth about the difficulties in implementing that plan that Cassie's facing at the staff level. Which ties into our earlier conversation about the need for more FTE to help implement the CCAP. And particularly this EV readiness plan that we already, have adopted. Implementing it is kind of a novel project for the city because it's an extremely cross-departmental type of project that there's not like an existing rubric for how to make that happen. Because the city's just never done something like that. So there's a federal grant out there that we had hoped that the city could go after to get some of the money to actually implement charging and implement that plan. But the kind of impasse that we're at is we just aren't ready for it. There's so much work figuring out how the city will actually do this type of project that like the likely timeline on this grant, like we just won't have our ducks in a row to make it happen. So I think I can safely say like that's frustrating all around for everyone who was on that call. And we're trying to figure out how did we get here? How do we get over this to make this like crucial project that we put in so much work on from back many years ago, even before the CCAP, and then in the CCAP, like including EV readiness as one of our strategies. And yet here we are, we still like aren't ready to go after like the money to make this happen. So that was a big motivation for the earlier conversation about the need for more FTE and dedicated resources to not miss opportunities like this. That's my quick summary. If others want to add to it.
Yeah, do you have anything else, Neil?
Well, we're maybe applying. Or the
It will depend. It has-
notice of funding opportunity hasn't come out yet. so
Yeah, like we're not
there's
closing the
still
door on it,
open
but the same limitations and constraints remain. So it'll kind of depend how it all comes together. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And that's, related to this committee too, because we put work in, although not everybody was here when we did the EV readiness work plan, but we're still no more public chargers, city supported public chargers deep over a long time and with a lot of resources already expended. So trying to use funding opportunities as an opportunity to work through those challenges and figure out what piece engineering has and what piece parking has and what piece is a climate component, and how all those systems work together. So we're trying to pull together, and there's some potential outside resources and other communities that have been able to do things and learn from them, so we can jump in there.
And we understand that multiple council members, maybe practically the entire city council, sees this as an important priority and might not be fully aware of the internal limitations, and this would be an important opportunity to open that up a little bit more. And the FTE capacity seems like a clear step and potentially one that the city council can speak to and help to move this forward.
Yep. Cool. Good. Transportation, nice work.
Who's next?
I can go next.
Working group or Covey, it's always hard to butt in when you're online, so go for it.
Okay. And I was also out for the last 2 weeks, and I just noticed that Cassie sent a very helpful email with an action plan for the waste and materials group. So I think I'll just use that as a guide, and then let Smita or Cassie chime in with anything else. We already presented to the committee our kind of priority actions for the year, and so the 3 actions we have as the top actions is outreach and education, the developing a waste reduction program targeting tourists, which is part of that is the reusables pilot project that we've talked about. And then we were also looking at 2 other actions, I think, which is implementing training programs with industries to prevent waste and low carbon concrete. I'll just focus on the top 2. I think some of the communications things we've talked about, including creating more of a sustainability hub on the website that includes actions that residents can take in addition to what the city is doing, is one of the top outcomes or deliverables that we're working on, which could include like a toolkit or a pamphlet. It does mention a mailing that goes out to all city residents, potentially focused on all sectors. That's something we've talked about before. And the reusables pilot project at some food services can also meet that. So in terms of the next steps, our next meeting is on April 30th, and is to begin kind of developing the content ideas, and kind of figuring out the path for that. We did also have a presentation from Rethink Waste Project from the Environmental Center from my manager there, Udara, 2 meetings ago, and that was really helpful to just understand all the work that's already being done in that way. And then we have a follow-up meeting in May, which is to discuss more of the reusables pilot project. And that's something we're still figuring out if we can do both of those things on like a dual track or not. And I think we're gonna have a discussion at the next meeting regarding that as well, according to Cassie's email. And I think there's a lot of similar things for the developing a waste reduction program targeting tourists as well. So I won't read all of this that's listed here. But basically those are 2 things we're currently focused on and working through. We did spend the last few months just getting a lot more information from for both of those topics as well. I don't know if that's a good enough report out. Did you have anything to add, Smita or Cassie?
That's great. Thanks for the notes, Cassie.
Yeah, these are really helpful, Cassie. Thanks.
Thanks, Abby.
I guess I'll just mention, especially based on the outreach and education being the top one. I do like the idea of the sustainability hub as well on the website. So I don't know if that falls within the short-term plans for the website that you had mentioned, Cassie, but I like how you mentioned that in the notes over here.
Yeah, thank
I'll go briefly for the energy group. We were able to get an update on some data questions that we've had and have been able to access some better data on the home energy score program that's been running now. There's about 1,000 scores-ish in the system. What'd you say?
1,200.
1,200. I thought you said 100. 1,200. So we got to dive into some of those things and have a conversation a little bit about what that looks like, lessons learned, and also some of those later components about communication and what city resources can be linked to, some of those pieces. So kind of further refining and improving that program. We also had a kind of brief discussion of a proposal that Lauren is working on at the Environmental Center about trying to help implement some of the audit goals that we have in our CCAP. But I don't know if Cassie, if you were gonna talk about that in agenda review, but we had a brief discussion about that. And I think that was most of the energy group.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add, Andrew?
No, I think, those are the 2 big topics. It's kind of nice to see that data come a little bit more publicly available as far as, progress, being able to track that progress. I do think that there's opportunity to partner with some of the nonprofits in the space that are already doing some of these things. And, one of the questions that we've heard a couple times here is just sort of resource allocation. So I think all those will come together, maybe when we have a little bit more information as far as what, some of the side ideas were.
And then also some of that home energy score data, like more to come on building that out to be a more publicly available asset.
Any highlights in the trends from the home energy score data? Maybe no analysis.
We were
is
kind of
done.
just like perusing it right now, but I actually wanted to show this to you guys because this is the story map
Oh,
that
can we
is,
all look at it? Is it
um,
accessible or not yet?
the links I can set, this should be accessible by, I just have like 2 edits to make and then it
Okay.
will go live and I'll send it out.
Okay.
This is the overall story map, but what's cool is that, so the home energy score dashboard's in this, but we also have a lot of other data that we're tracking in here. So we've built all of our data into Power BI and then that displays these dashboards. So we have like our overall greenhouse gas emissions, our per capita greenhouse gas emissions. And then we also have our CCAP project status. And then there's each sector has its own section. And in each sector, we're tracking more specific data like our electricity consumption, natural gas. We have one on how much, this is like rooftop solar added from our permit data, which is kind of cool. The dotted line is our targets. We're actually smashing our targets in those areas, which is great. How much solar the city's adding. So anyway, this is just something I've been working on as far as just our progress reporting on our CCAP. And I bring it up now because this is where I have incorporated the home energy score dashboard, which is here. And it's going to be a little smaller on this, but you can mess with the way it is structured now is you can like, this here just shows a summary of everything. So how many assessments there are, what the average score is, the average improved score, the average cost savings, and then you can kind of mess around with these to like narrow it down. So if you want to only look at homes between 1950 or 1915 and 1950, you can like toggle that. And then all of these findings change. And you can do it with the year built, the square feet. And then you can also look at, if you want to look at like, where do homes score between an 8 and a 10, you can play with that filter and then see that. And the yellow one, the yellow dots are the pre-construction scores. So that's new construction. And then the blue dots are existing homes. So anyway, that's kind of cool. And I just wanted to share that with you all since it was relevant.
It looks like it does have some real variation in the data.
What do you mean?
Like that, they're not all the same. They're not all at sort of similar scores, which
Yeah.
I would, I think that would make it not very useful.
Yeah.
For example, if there wasn't much variation, but the variance in colors suggests that they're, well, I guess.
Well, the colors is just whether it's an existing home or
Oh, okay.
reconstruction, but you can see.
Those are
It's like
averages by
histogram.
bedroom size.
So the
Okay.
average is by bedroom size and then, yeah, I don't know
That's
a
7
quick way of
bedrooms at the
looking at
bottom,
like,
so,
yeah, anyway, but we definitely have all scores, reflected.
I think that continues to evolve, as you see more of a purpose to the data and as far as what the decisions are. Because I had the same question, like, are we seeing low scores clustered in a particular part of town? I don't think we have that information quite that.
Well, we
She
did-
just added that.
We just added
Oh, you
that.
did, sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you can
so now we
select
can
by
look at all the
score.
ones. So here are all the ones all over Opry Butte.
Well, that's part of it.
Just kidding.
You have a CCAP action to build smaller housing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so we added that filter looking at the score, but there is, we're definitely open to like feedback and ideas and how we can continue, we're somewhat limited in what we can and can't do with it, but if you have ideas of other ways other things you want displayed, definitely let us know and I can talk to our team about that. And then same thing with like the rest of the data that we have. We built this out using the data that we were able to get, but we hope to just continue to improve on this data over time. And now, especially that we have like a platform built out and we have the Power BI reports built out, it should be easier to continue refining and adding to it.
It'd be cool if the colors could reflect the
Scores.
scores and maybe like have a different shape for the
Yeah.
pre-construction versus existing.
Yeah, I can ask about that. I don't know.
You can visualize a lot of things.
That would be really cool.
yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay.
I just want to make a quick note, Cassie, that's really cool to see. I didn't realize 1,200 homes already had that. When it makes sense, I would love to get a little bit more of an update on just how that's going. I don't know if that's already planned.
The home energy score program as a whole.
Yeah, just because I know we had I'm just curious how so many homes if that would how many of them required like a notice or a letter, or just like a little bit more details on how that program is going, if that's available?
Yeah, we actually have like we got a dashboard on the enforcement activity too, so, we might be able to talk about that at next month's meeting when we do kind of our overall CCAP progress report. I
Yeah.
can plan on, doing just a little bit deeper dive on that.
Sounds great.
Okay,
Ready to
great.
move to agenda review?
Yep.
Okay, so next month, we're starting our CCAP update. So the plan will be to do progress report. So I'll just share out with you our overall progress. And I'll also propose which actions I think we can count as complete and would therefore recommend moving, when we do our update, taking those off, and we can kind of include them in the report as completed actions if we want to make sure that we're still keeping those top of mind. So that'll be that's the main CCAP update action for next month. And then I don't think that'll take the whole meeting. So then in addition to that, we do have a proposal from the Environmental Center for funding. They would like to support a couple of programs that meet a number of different CCAP objectives. Lauren has been working with them on that a little bit. And so they intend to send that proposal in the next couple of weeks, and then we would like to have a discussion about that proposal at the next meeting. I don't know that we necessarily will be ready for you all to make a decision at that meeting, but we'll kind of introduce that topic, and you guys may feel like you're ready to make a decision about that, or you may want to think about it and come back later. So that was what we were proposing for the next month's, for the May meeting. And then in June, the next CCAP update step is refining existing actions. So that's when I would come to you all with any actions in the CCAP that I think will keep in the CCAP, but they just need to be modified to make them reflect the current context or just our updated understanding of them. So it'll be a discussion about language to refine existing actions. And then in July, we may have time for another agenda item. I'm not really sure yet. And then in July is when we actually start the new action development, and we will be breaking up into working groups. I wrote a note on here, we don't have to decide today, but we may want to consider canceling the main meeting. We often cancel our main, like one of the summer meetings anyway. What did I say?
July. You said
July.
May.
Oh, July, yeah. In July, we may want to consider canceling it because we'll be working in the working groups. We can decide next month or the month after if that feels appropriate. Because you'll all still be meeting that month. And I know the summer gets tough anyway, so. Are there any thoughts on particularly the May agenda or any of the other agendas that are up here?
Great.
Does that look good?
Yeah.
Excited for the update in June.
Oh,
Maybe we could get an
Yeah.
update.
I guess it's CCAP update dash.
In May, should we have an update on the update? Stop.
City policy.
I love it.
A lot of steps.
All right, meeting adjourned. 1-0-1. We did very good.